Have you ever wondered why the kindest and most understanding people in the world sometimes explode so much that they scare even those they've known for years? Carl Jung discovered something disturbing about empaths that society prefers to ignore. There is a breaking point where all this accumulated goodness turns into something completely different. And when that happens, it's not just an ordinary outburst of anger. It's the awakening of a dark force that has been silently nurtured for years. Jung called this the reversal of the archetype, the moment when the healer becomes the destroyer, when the protector becomes the predator. But here's the most shocking thing. This breakdown isn't accidental. It is inevitable. And if you're an empathetic person, that's going to happen to you too, unless you understand the hidden signs that Jung identified. Today, we're going to dive into the Swiss psychologist's darkest warning about human nature. A truth that can save relationships or destroy them forever. 1. The silence that kills from within. What really happens in the soul of a person who is always smiling, even when the world around him is collapsing? Jung discovered that empathic people develop a dangerous habit. They swallow their true feelings like poison that slowly spreads inside them. This silence usually begins in childhood. The child quickly learns that his own needs are less important than the harmony of the family. It stops crying when it's sad. It no longer complains when it is tired. It learns that love is something you have to earn by taking the problems of others more seriously than your own. Years pass, and these people become masters at silencing their inner voice. They still feel the pain, but they have learned to bury it so deeply that they forget that it is there, like a tumor that grows without you noticing. Jung warned that this kind of silence is not only unhealthy, it is deadly for the soul. When we continuously suppress our true feelings, we create an internal pressure that must explode at some point. It's like a steam boiler without a valve. The danger lies not only in the oppression itself, but in what these people begin to believe about themselves. They think they are stronger than others because they can endure more. They think they are better because they don't become weak like other people. But in truth, they are only building a bomb in their own chest. Silence becomes their identity. They become proud of the fact that they are never a problem. They boast that they are always there for others, but never need help. But Jung knew this apparent strength is in fact the greatest weakness of all. What these people don't understand is that any suppressed feeling doesn't go away. It accumulates. It waits. It's getting stronger. And one day, when they least expect it, it will make its way out, not as a gentle tear or a quiet conversation, but as an avalanche of destruction. Jung observed that people who remain silent for years often have the most violent outbursts, not because they are bad people, but because they have accumulated so much that the outbreak is proportional to the oppression. They have pushed themselves into a corner from which there is no gentle way out. The tragedy is that these people are often completely surprised by their own explosion. They cannot understand how they, who have always been so peaceful, are suddenly capable of such anger. They feel like strangers in their own bodies because they have forgotten who they really are under all the layers of silence. Silence becomes a weapon against herself. It robs them not only of the ability to communicate their needs, but also of the ability to feel them at all. They become living spirits of themselves, walking through life and making everyone happy except themselves. 2. When the kind heart turns to stone. There is a moment in the life of every empath that Jung referred to as the great betrayal. It is not a single event, but a creeping realization. All the goodness they have given into the world does not come back to them. The people for whom they have sacrificed themselves do not even think to say, "Thank you." This realization hits her like a slap in the face. For years, they believed that kindness automatically brings goodness back. They thought that their victims would be seen and appreciated, but then comes the day when they realize the world has taken their goodness for granted. What happens next is what Jung described as emotional petrification. The heart, which was once so soft and open, begins to harden, not out of malice, but out of self-protection. It is as if the soul decides, if kindness leads only to pain, then I will cease to be kind. This process doesn't happen overnight. It begins with small moments of doubt. A thought like, why am I actually doing this, creeps in. Then comes a feeling of tiredness that goes deeper than physical exhaustion. It is the weariness of the soul that has given for too long without receiving. The first signs of petrification are subtle. The empath begins to respond more slowly when someone asks for help. He hesitates a moment longer before saying yes. He begins to ask questions that he would never have asked before. What's in it for me? Jung noted that these people are often shocked by their own new thoughts. They have become so accustomed to being selfless that any thought of themselves feels like a betrayal of their identity. But petrification cannot be stopped once it has begun. The hardened heart develops a new way of thinking. It begins to divide the world into categories, givers and takers, and suddenly the empath sees only takers everywhere. People who have taken advantage of his kindness, people who have never thought of giving anything back, people who saw him as weak because he was kind. This new perspective is like a poison that runs through all memories. Situations that were once perceived as beautiful moments of helpfulness are now seen as moments of exploitation. The hardened heart reinterprets the past and finds evidence of its own deceit everywhere. Jung warned that this phase is particularly dangerous because it can lead to a complete reversal of personality. The once kind person becomes someone who despises goodness as weakness. He begins to distrust others before they even have a chance to disappoint him. Steinhertz is developing new rules. I only give if I get something in return. I only help people who deserve it. And I will be tough before others are me. These rules feel like protection, but in reality they are prison staffs. The tragedy lies in the fact that these people miss their old goodness, but are afraid to leave it behind. They have learned that an open heart is a vulnerable heart, so they stick to their new hardness, even if it feels strange and cold. The petrified heart becomes armor that is supposed to protect her from further injury. But like any armor, it's heavy to wear and doesn't let anything in, neither pain nor joy. They become emotional zombies that function but are no longer really alive. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the SIM Method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. 3. The mask of everything is fine. Every morning, millions of people put on an invisible mask before leaving home. It's not plastic or fabric. It's smiles, nods, and the words, I'm fine. Jung called this mask the most dangerous of all lies because it deceives not only others, but also the wearer himself. The mask is born from a deep belief that one's own problems are unimportant. These people have learned that their role in life is to help others, not to need help themselves. They become professional problem solvers for everyone else, while their own problems rot in a dark basement of their souls. What makes this mask so perfect? It adapts to any situation. At work, it becomes professional competence. At home, it becomes parental strength. With friends, it becomes unwavering support. The mask is so well fitted that even the closest people do not notice that there is a person drowning behind it. Jung observed that these people develop a disturbing ability. They can hide their own feelings so well that they forget what they really feel. The mask becomes her true face. They lose contact with their inner reality and live only in the outer performance. The perfidious thing about this mask is that it is rewarded. Society loves people who never cause problems. Bosses appreciate employees who never get sick or complain. Families rely on the member who is always strong. This positive reinforcement makes the mask even firmer and harder to remove, but something dark accumulates under the mask. Every suppressed tear, every swallowed scream, every ignored fear, everything accumulates like water behind a dam. The person sometimes feels a strange pressure, but cannot assign it. She thinks it's just stress or fatigue. The mask develops a life of its own over time. She begins to make decisions. She says yes to things that the person actually wants to reject. She smiles in situations that would deserve tears. It promises help when the person himself is at the end of his or her strength. Jung warned of a particularly dangerous moment, when the person begins to believe their own mask. She really thinks that everything is fine. She convinces herself that she has no problems, that she is stronger than others. This self-deception is the point at which healing becomes almost impossible. The mask also creates a distorted relationship with reality. These people become unable to recognize or articulate their own needs. When someone asks, "How are you really?" they don't know what to answer. The automatic response, "good," comes so fast that they don't have time to really think about it. It becomes particularly tragic when these people get into crises. Their mask has separated them so much from their real feelings that they don't know how to ask for help. They have pretended for so long that everything is okay that they don't know how to admit that this is not the case. The mask becomes a prison without a key. The person wants to take them off, but they have forgotten what it feels like to live without them. She is afraid that no one would love her without the mask. She fears that her true feelings are too ugly, too weak, or too chaotic. Jung realized that the day the mask breaks can be one of the most violent moments in a person's life. Emotions that have been pent up for years break out like a tsunami. The person is not prepared for it because they have forgotten that these feelings even exist. 4. The poison of forced friendliness. There is a kind of friendliness that Jung described as mental poison. It is not the natural kindness that flows from an open heart, but the artificial kindness that is born of fear and despair. These people aren't kind because they want to. They're kind because they're afraid of what will happen if they're not. This forced kindness comes from a deep conviction that they are only lovable if they are perfect. They have learned that any trace of anger, frustration, or disappointment makes them bad people, so they force themselves to always be smiling, always helpful, always understanding. The poison takes effect slowly but surely. Every time they suppress their true feelings to be kind, they die a tiny bit from within. Every forced smile is like a drop of acid on her soul. They don't notice it right away because society rewards their performance and they feel like good people. Jung noticed something frightening. People with forced kindness often develop an inner hatred for the very people they are most friendly to. They hate those who take advantage of their kindness, but they cannot show or even admit that hatred. Instead, they become even friendlier, which only reinforces the inner hatred. These people live in a constant internal war. One part of them screams in anger and frustration, while the other part drowns out these cries with kindness. They become split personalities without realizing it. On the outside, the perfect person, on the inside, a battlefield. The perfidious thing about forced friendliness is that it is addictive. These people need the recognition they get for their kindness. They need the words, "You're so nice," or "What would we do without you?" These sentences become their drug, without which they no longer know who they are. But like any drug, they need larger and larger doses. You have to become more and more friendly, more and more helpful, more and more selfless, in order to get the same feeling of recognition. They outdo themselves in their goodness until they are completely exhausted. Jung warned of a dangerous turning point. The moment when these people realize that their kindness is not genuine, this realization can be devastating. They feel like fraudsters, like fake people. They begin to doubt whether anything about them is authentic. The forced friendliness also creates a distorted view of other people. These people cannot understand why other people are sometimes in a bad mood or speak their minds directly. They see such behavior as weak or wrong because they themselves have never learned that negative feelings are normal and healthy. It becomes particularly dangerous when these people begin to blame others for their own oppression. They think, "I'm always nice to you. Why aren't you nice to me?" They don't understand that real relationships are based on honesty, not performance. The poison of forced kindness also poisons their capacity for genuine intimacy. They can't form deeper relationships because they never show their true selves. Her partners and friends only love her mask, not herself. This leads to a deep loneliness in the middle of seemingly loving relationships. The day this poison takes full effect is the day they explode. All suppressed anger, all swallowed frustration, all denied disappointment bursts forth. And ironically, they are finally honest, but possible in the most destructive way. 5. The explosion that no one sees coming. It happens on an ordinary day. Maybe it's a Tuesday, maybe it's raining lightly. The empath does what he always does. He helps, he smiles, he cares about others. But then something small, something insignificant happens, and suddenly a bomb explodes that no one knew was there. Jung described this moment as the spontaneous discharge of the soul. It's not like a normal outburst of anger that builds up and you see coming. It's like lightning in a clear sky. 1 second everything is normal, and the next, the friendliest person you know turns into someone you don't recognize. What makes this explosion so shocking is its utter unpredictability. The trigger is usually something harmless, a forgotten thank you, a small criticism, a thoughtless remark, something that would normally have been ignored or put away with a smile. But not this time. This time, it is the straw that breaks the camel's back. The people around the empath are completely unprepared. They have only seen the calm, understanding side for years or even decades. They thought they knew this person. They thought they knew what to expect. Suddenly, they are confronted by a stranger who throws all their certainties overboard. Jung observed that these explosions often have a frightening intensity. It's not just anger. It's years of suppressed anger, accumulated disappointment, and stowed despair all coming out at once. It is as if a dam is breaking that has been holding back more and more water for years. The words that are said in these moments are like knives. They hit exactly the most vulnerable parts of other people because the empath knows them so well. He knows where it hurts because he has always been so attentive. Now this attention becomes a weapon. What makes the explosion even more disturbing is the clarity with which it happens. The empath is not out of control at this moment. He is crystal clear. He suddenly sees all the situations in which he has been exploited. He remembers every moment when his kindness was taken for granted. It is as if a fog lifts and reality becomes clearly visible for the first time. The people who experience this explosion often do not understand what has just happened. They only see the destruction, not the years of construction to go with it. They think the person has gone crazy or is showing their true colors. They do not understand that what they are experiencing is the explosion of too much goodness, not too little. Jung warned that these explosions often cause irreparable damage. Relationships break down in minutes that took years to build. Trust is destroyed, which can never be repaired. Family and friends retreat, confused and hurt by the sudden violence. The tragic thing is that after the explosion, the empath is often just as shocked as everyone else. He cannot believe that these words have come out of his mouth. He does not recognize himself in what he has done. It's as if someone else has taken over his body. But at the same time, he also feels a strange relief. For the first time in years, he has said what he really thinks. For the first time, he has shown his true feelings. It feels liberating and frightening at the same time, like breathing for the first time after years underwater. The explosion leaves a devastation in its wake, which is difficult to repair. But it also shows a truth that has been hidden for too long, that even the most patient people have limits, and that goodness without limits can turn into cruelty. 6. The dark side of worrying too much. There is a type of worry that Jung called a deadly embrace. It is worry that does not heal, but suffocates. The worry that does not come from love, but from the desperate need to be needed. These people do not care about others because it is good for others. They do it because without this concern they do not know who they are. This extreme concern often begins with the best of intentions. The empath sees pain and wants to help. But somewhere along the way, helping becomes an addiction. He needs people who need his help. He needs problems that he can solve. He becomes an emotional vampire who feeds on the problems of others. Jung discovered something disturbing. People who worry too much often unconsciously create the problems they can then worry about. They keep other people small and weak so that they can feel important and valuable. They become saviors who need their victims to define themselves. The perfidious thing about this dark worry is that it disguises itself as love. These people really believe that they are acting out of kindness. They don't see how their constant help infantilizes other people. They do not notice how their concern becomes a control. They don't understand that by helping, they are depriving others of the opportunity to grow. The dark side shows itself in subtle signs. These people get angry when their help is refused. They feel hurt when someone solves a problem without them. They begin to impose their help, even if it is not wanted. They cannot accept that other people sometimes want to get along on their own. Jung noted that these overly caring people often develop a frightening anger against those they care about. They get angry with their children when they become independent. They are annoyed with their partners when they don't need help. They feel betrayed by people who solve their problems themselves. This anger is particularly toxic because it hides behind worry. "I'm just worried about you" becomes a weapon. "I only want your best" becomes a justification for control. These people develop a masterful ability to package their manipulation as love. The dark worry also creates a distorted reality. These people cannot see when their help is harmful. They interpret any resistance as proof that the other person is sick or confused. They believe that they are the only ones who really understand what others need. It becomes particularly destructive in families. Mothers who can't let go of their children. Fathers who treat their adult children like babies. Partners who have to control every aspect of each other's lives, all under the guise of care and love. Jung warned of the moment when these people realize that their concern is not wanted, that the people they have cared for all their lives find them suffocating. This realization can plunge them into a deep crisis, because their whole identity was built on being needed. The dark worry also poisons the capacity for real intimacy. These people cannot have equal relationships. They always need someone weaker to save. They are incapable of real love, because real love means being able to let go. The day they explode is often the day someone tells them, "I don't need your help." These simple words can set off an avalanche because they shake the foundation of their entire existence. Without their role as rescuers, they don't know who they are. 7. How Jung discovered the limit of goodness. Carl Jung was an empath himself, and that was his curse and his blessing at the same time. In his practice in Zurich, he sat across from people day after day who shared their darkest secrets with him. He soaked up her pain like a sponge, and for years he thought that was his calling, until one day he realized that he was about to lose himself. It was in the year 1913 when Jung experienced his own dark night of the soul. He had absorbed so much pain from other people that he no longer knew which feelings were his own. He began to dream the dreams of his patients. He felt their fears as his own. It had become a mirror that reflected everything, but had nothing of its own. Jung described this time as the confrontation with the unconscious. But in truth, it was the confrontation with his own goodness that almost destroyed him. He realized that his empathy was not only a gift, but also a weapon against himself. He had used it to distract himself from his own problems. The realization came suddenly and brutally. Jung realized that he wasn't just curing his patients, he was hiding behind their healing. Their problems were easier to solve than his own. Her pain was more understandable than his own conflicts. He had become a professional helper so that he did not have to live his own life. Jung discovered that goodness must have a limit, or it becomes self-destruction. He called this boundary the sacred boundary of the self. It is the point at which one must stop giving in order not to cease to exist. It is the line between compassion and self-abandonment. What shocked Jung so much was the realization that most people never learn this boundary. They give and give until there is nothing left of them. They think that boundless kindness is a virtue, but Jung saw that it is a slow suicide. They sacrifice themselves for others, but in the end, it doesn't help anyone. Jung observed a frightening pattern in himself and his patients. The more they gave, the emptier they became. The more helpful they were, the more helpless they became. The more they saved others, the more they needed salvation themselves. It was a vicious circle that could only be broken by radical realization. This realization was painful. Sometimes the greatest kindness is not to be kind. Sometimes the best help is not to help. Sometimes you have to let people fall so that they learn to stand. Jung called this the wisdom of salutary cruelty. Jung experimented with boundaries. For the first time in his life, he said no to people who needed his help. It felt like betrayal, like selfishness, like a sin against everything he had learned. But slowly, he realized that these boundaries didn't just save him, they also helped others become stronger. The discovery of the border led Jung to a revolutionary realization. Real love sometimes requires toughness. True goodness sometimes means being tough. Authentic compassion can sometimes seem heartless. It was a paradox that changed everything he thought about human relationships. Jung developed the concept of individuated goodness, goodness that emanates from a strong self, not a desperate need for recognition. This kind of kindness can say no. It can set limits. It can disappoint people when it is necessary. She's not nice, she's real. For Jung, finding the limit of goodness also meant accepting his own darkness. He had to admit that he helped not only out of love, but also out of pride, out of the need to be needed, out of fear of loneliness. This honesty was painful, but liberating. Jung warned that people who do not know their limits will eventually explode. The pent-up anger about one's own self-denial must find a way out. And when it comes, it is proportional to the years of oppression. The longer someone has been boundlessly kind, the more destructive their outburst will be. 8. The awakening of the inner darkness. Jung called it the encounter with the shadow. The moment when the empath discovers his own darkness, it is not the darkness of evil, but the darkness of suppressed truth. All the anger, the disappointment, the despair that has been hidden for years suddenly awakens like a sleeping dragon. This awakening does not happen gently. It is not a gradual process of self-knowledge. It is an explosion of reality that destroys everything the person believed about themselves. The kind, patient, understanding person suddenly discovers that he can also be angry, vengeful and cruel. The first thing that awakens is anger, not the small irritation of everyday life, but a deep, burning anger at years of self-denial. Anger at all people who have taken advantage of their kindness. Anger at themselves for allowing it. Anger at the world that has interpreted kindness as weakness. Jung observed that this anger often brings with it a frightening clarity. Suddenly, these people see the truth about their relationships. They recognize who has really taken advantage of them. They understand which people were only with them as long as they could get something. This clarity is like a cold light that burns all illusions. The awakening also brings with it a new kind of power. The empath discovers that he can hurt other people and that he sometimes wants to. He realizes that all the years of attention have given him an intimate knowledge of other people's weaknesses. Now, he no longer sees these weaknesses as something he needs to heal, but as goals. This new power is exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. Years of powerlessness are suddenly replaced by a sense of complete control. The empath can destroy with one sentence what took years to build. He can hurt with a glance what he used to heal with hugs. Jung warned against this phase because it can lead to a complete reversal of personality. The once kind person becomes one who despises kindness. He becomes hard, cold, and sometimes cruel. He vows never to be vulnerable again, never to be exploited again. The awakening of darkness also brings with it a frightening honesty. These people stop lying about their feelings, about their needs, about their opinions. They suddenly say things that they have thought for years but never said. This honesty is like a sword that cuts through everything. Family and friends are shocked by this transformation. They don't understand that what they see is not a new person, but the other half of a person they never knew. The empath was always complete. He had only hidden one half. Jung recognized that this awakening is necessary for the whole of man. Without the integration of darkness, man remains half a person. But the path of integration is dangerous because many people get lost in the darkness and never find their way back to the light. The awakening also reveals the illusion of old goodness. The empath realizes that much of what he thought was love was actually fear. Fear of rejection, fear of loneliness, fear of one's own shadow. This realization can be devastating, but darkness also brings liberation. For the first time in years, the empath is authentic. He shows his whole self, not just the acceptable parts. He is finally honest about his needs, his limits, his truth. Jung taught that the goal is not to return to the old goodness, but to find a new kind of kindness, one that has the darkness integrated. A goodness that is strong enough to say no. A love that is honest enough to be hard at times. A compassion that is wise enough to have limits. This is the true transformation of the empath, not the destruction of goodness, but its completion through the integration of the shadow.